Hi, welcome to the new voting project. My name is Kanal, your host. Like I said, things really don't change on this show. We try to keep it simple. And today we're here with Vice Mayor Julie Testa from the city of Pleasanton, California. Are an elected member of the Pleasanton City Council, a 30-year resident, a board member on Tri-Valley Reach, a member of the Tri-Valley chapter of NAMI, and also the executive director of CALE, the California Alliance of Elected Officials, arguing for specific housing policies in the state of California. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I understand you are very busy these days, but thank you. We do appreciate your time.
Sure. Well, I'm really happy to be here, Kanal. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, anytime. So yeah, let's dive into these questions. Just as a first question, it's pretty basic. Talk a little bit about your background and what got you into this, what got you into the world of politics? Why did you choose to do it?
Oh, I always think that's a funny question because I didn't choose to do it. And having raised my family in Pleasanton, 3 sons, we all start off with local concerns. And I was always involved in our schools and our community and supporting other community electeds. And really, it was an evolution of being involved and being concerned about different things that just kind of evolved into a point where I felt that I could no longer get away with expecting someone else to do it, to run for office. And so I found myself at that crossroads where I needed to make that decision of whether I would step up instead of encouraging someone else to step up. But I will say that I feel it's an absolute privilege to serve my community. And I enjoy very much the connection and the opportunity to work with the residents and the businesses of our community. So I will say I have deep roots in activism, in that when I was less than 5 years old, my parents took me door to door campaigning for Robert Kennedy back in the day. Yes, I'm that old. So I still have campaign posters from the campaign.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So I absolutely was raised with a philosophy of being involved and community service. So yeah, that's pretty much what got me here, I think.
Right. And I guess as a council member today, representing the city of Pleasanton, talk a little bit about some of your core values, your policy objectives. What are you trying to accomplish in your own community, and its potential shortcomings?
Yeah. Well, definitely, if we're talking core values, my core values, I think, absolutely are family first, community service, and just general service to others. In fact, you had mentioned that I'm currently on the board of the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And I'll just correct, I am a past board member for REACH, which is a nonprofit that wore many hats, because both of these nonprofits are all volunteer nonprofits. So we don't just sit as board members, but actually run the organization. So with REACH, I was very involved in developing low-income housing for a developmentally disabled population. And currently with NAMI, again, we are working board. So I'm very active in the work that we do on mental health issues. So I come to the council with having been, and I don't think I've ever shared with you, is that I had been 11 years a Pleasanton human service commissioner.
Right.
So I brought with me those years of advocating for our community's vulnerable populations. So I definitely bring all of that to my work as a city council person. I have deep and sincere advocacy for our homeless population and our vulnerable populations. But and I'm known for advocacy on school issues, but most of my time today is spent on state housing legislation. I used to believe that I could focus on local, and that's where I could do the most good for my community, where I had the most impact. But I learned a few years ago that there were some sincere concerns, some real threats to the quality of life of our community. And those threats were coming from at a state level. And that if we didn't take those seriously, there would be significant consequences to ours and other communities. So I have, since being elected, formed an organization, and it's the California Alliance of Local Electeds. And what my peers from around the state join me on Sunday afternoons every week. And we have guest speakers. We talk about issues that are of concern to our local communities, but more often how the state impacts our local communities. And most frequently that conversation is about housing. And we have spent the last year and a half at least speaking with state legislators, assembly and senators. We've had dozens, many, and we've learned a lot. It's been fascinating. I've learned a lot. And we're trying to understand why the state wants to make such significant impacts on our communities. And not just Pleasanton, but every community across the state. Their current agenda is to eliminate single-family zoning. Single-family zoning means right now we have neighborhoods where there's one lot, one house.
Right.
And there are laws right now that are imminent within the next 6 to 8 weeks will possibly pass and change that so that there will no longer be single family zoning across the state. It would be completely eliminated. And what that means is that if my house goes on the market, whoever, or my neighbor's house goes on the market is a better way of saying it. And the young family that wants to buy the house is going to be outbid, because now that one lot has the potential to be 4 to 6 houses on that one lot. So it really has a negative impact on our next generation, because the property value will have gone up, and there will be incentive to investors, speculators. And if they buy that one house and turn it into 4 or 6 houses right next to ours, there is not a requirement of replacing parking, so cars will overflow into neighborhoods. And the other law that is currently being considered, if the house on the other side of me goes on the market, again, a speculator may and is likely to outbid the young family who would like to raise their children there. And instead, if SB 10 passes, there is the potential that they could build up to a small 10-unit apartment complex in our single family neighborhood. SB 10 would require the being sanctioned by the local city council, which also brings with SB 10 an incentive for special interest groups to take over our city councils so that they can control these decisions. Anyway, there are so many of these pieces of legislation that are going to have such dramatic impacts on our communities. And they do it under the guise of creating affordable housing, and yet none of these bills have any requirement of affordable housing. And they won't achieve affordable housing. So one of the things I'd like to share with you is there was a state assembly member that testified on the assembly floor about a month ago. And in his testimony, he said that he was concerned. He was testifying on voting on SB 9. And he said he felt it wasn't a good bill, that he didn't believe that it would accomplish affordability, that he knew the cities did not want it, and that he believed that the constituents, the residents, do not want it. And he felt that his peers were supporting it and would vote for it to create an illusion that they're doing something about the affordable housing problem. This is all on tape, all on video. And he at the end then says, but I'm going to vote for it anyway. And he said, but I won't vote for the next one, which, because of that speech, we invited him to Cali, to our group. And dozens of other local electeds and myself spoke with him and told him that we appreciated that he understood that this was not a bill that was good for our communities. We appreciated his comment about that he felt that his peers were willing to put this bill forward, knowing that the cities didn't want it, because he felt the cities were not strong enough. They weren't a powerful enough source, but that the special interest groups that are supporting it are powerful, and that our legislators don't want to go against the powerful special interest groups, but they feel there's little risk in throwing our cities under the bus, their own constituents that they know won't like these bills under the bus. And they just hope that their constituents never really figure out that they're the ones who did this to us. So, Cali feels very strongly that we need to work towards affordable solutions. We recognize an affordability crisis, but we do not believe that the legislation that's coming through is going to accomplish solving that. We believe that it is a giveaway to powerful special interest groups. And that legislator, who is on record having said all that and still having said that he was going to vote for it anyway, a week later announced that he's running for governor. So understand the political agendas that play into these things, and understand that our legislators know that they're not serving their communities when they vote for they've told us, many of them have told us so at different Cali meetings. I'll end with just saying, having said all that, our canal, I know Senator Glazier is our state senator, and Rebecca Bauer-Cahan is our state assemblywoman. And so I have to say to anyone who hears this, both of them have pretty consistently voted in support of our cities and for local control and against these bills, and really work toward being very brave, going against their peers in the legislature, and knowing how our cities feel about these pieces of legislation. That said, these pieces of legislation are almost certainly going to pass, and we need to then know what our next step will be. So that's what I'm doing most of my days.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot. Not gonna lie, that's a heavy burden. If I may just ask, why utilize so much energy just to focus on housing, and the advocacy that you do as part of Calais? Why is that almost the primary point of concern?
Right. Well, I really do feel that I've put an awful lot of my focus on our other local issues. I believe that I've contributed significantly in only 2 years to a mental health urgent care program that has just launched in our Tri-Valley. I know I have played a significant role with my background from NAMI, and that's something that's amazing and going to serve our families well. But there are other people that are also supportive of that program, and it doesn't need as much of my attention. Fortunately, I mean, that program was something that was never thought of more than 2 years ago. So the fact that there really has been an awakening and an understanding of some of the issues that I've spent so much time working on in the past, mental health advocacy. And lately we've had an issue with our, COVID in downtown. And I feel like I've absolutely focused a lot of energy there also. But to answer your question, because the housing issue is very divisive, number one, and I hope to bridge some of that division and educate more people on what is happening. But because there was a very one-sided false narrative that was there, it really is an issue that there wasn't, no one else was taking it up, or not enough people were taking it up, because it is going up against very powerful special interest groups and going up against the state. And it really has been something that I've connected with many other elected officials across the state who felt also that it was such a big and overwhelming issue that there was a feeling, like that legislator said, that cities couldn't do anything about it. And with Calais, many of us have come together. And by coming together, we feel that there are things that we can and must do. So yes, to answer your question, that takes up probably more of my time than most of the other issues as an individual, because there isn't enough representation doing so.
Right. And having firsthand witnessed your representation, I can vouch that the work you're doing is absolutely phenomenal. And I will link all of Calais' websites and other items in the description below for people to follow along with. So thank you for that. Moving on, kind of towards a separate subject, let's talk about 2020. A very strange year, some would say, once in a century pandemic, a polarized election. Just walk me through your thoughts on 2020, and voting and all of the issues that comprised last year. What would you think? What would you argue for now?
I think you hit it when you said polarized. I think that what is the most disappointing is an unwillingness for two extreme groups to actually work together. And I think that that is what is so destructive. It's been hard for all of us to watch. And with Callie, the group that we were just talking about, that's a bipartisan group. We are truly a blended group, and we work together because we're working together for the common goal of what we believe is in the best interest of our state. And we have no difficulties working together. And I am a lifetime Democrat. My husband is a lifetime Republican. And we work very well together and have for over 40 years. And we're better for it. Nelson Mandela quotes, he said, "Our differences are our strength as a world community." And 2020 showed us the worst of that. And I think what we need to do is work toward coming together and being less polarized. And I will share that it doesn't always go over well. I'm surprised at how angry some people are, just suggesting that we should work together, the parties. But I'll use my Cali group. Because we bring different perspectives together, we really are better for it. And between my husband and I know he and I are better people. My hearing him and him hearing me. And I think that's one of the things that we need to see more of: people listening, people being willing to listen instead of hating someone because they have an R or a D in front of their name before they've even said anything, and immediately dismissing what they might say because they're not of the same party. So coming out of the 2020 election, I think we're at the worst we've ever been, and we've got to find a way to get better again, to heal our country, and in fact, to identify our differences as strengths. And so I'm not sure I answered your full question there.
No, I think I I got the gist of it. I would just add that at the local level, from what I've observed, your party, your party alignment doesn't necessarily constitute the full range of your values. And I would say that at the local level, any representative, any elected, any community member that's advocating for their beliefs or the beliefs of a majority, without the special interest collusion, without an external factor, is doing their job. At the federal and potentially even at the state level, things can get really complicated, like we saw in 2020.
Right.
But at least for the local level, where representation truly impacts the people who live in those environments, I look past a Democrat, a D or an R. I look past that and I go straight to, what do you believe in? Because that's what matters.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the local level, we're nonpartisan. Our candidacy, our elections are nonpartisan. So
Yes.
it shouldn't be seen that way. And we should be looking at community and trying to not be divisive. I will say that we are more divided by issue than by party locally. There are issues where we do have division, but it really isn't straight across a party line. It is more about a perspective of issue. So, and I will say, while I have significant concerns and have learned things that I never wanted to learn about how special interest drives state politics and certainly national. But I do not believe, I've never encountered at a local level, certainly not within my city of Pleasanton, anyone who I believed was driven by anything other than truly their sincere, even though I may disagree with what they believe should happen, I know that they sincerely believe that they are doing what is in the best of our community. And I have not ever seen anything that locally that I would call out as corruption. I believe that what happens seems to be that when people move on from the local level, they get pulled into a different world and things do change. And I think a big piece of that is the cost of campaigns. It's always about money, but it isn't about lining pockets necessarily. I mean, in some cases that might happen, but it really is the looking for those special interest groups that are going to help them fund their campaign. And so we really do need to make more efforts to get the money out of politics and take a look more at that, at which, by the way, Pleasanton, we talked about that at a recent city council meeting, and we put in some new campaign spending guidelines to try and keep our local campaigns more reasonable, and by hopefully creating some spending guidelines, keep some of the special interest money out of our local campaigns. It won't be, we aren't able to get the soft money out, but at least having the discussion and identifying it as an issue for our community, hopefully that'll help in future campaigns.
Right. And I guess circling back to something you had mentioned earlier, the power of voting. I guess the central focus and theme of this channel is to talk about voting rights. It's an issue we've been dealing with, some could argue, for a couple hundred years, since the 60s. You obviously understand that. I didn't know you technically volunteered for Robert Kennedy, but that's pretty cool. I got to see one of those posters.
Yeah.
But, you know, there across the United States, there's been a range of voting rights issues, especially after the 2020 election. But I just want to start off with asking a simple question, which is, how important is voting?
Oh my goodness, of course, it's huge. I mean, during, our campaigns, we spend so much time trying to meet every voter possible and trying to help them understand what we want, how we want to represent them. And it's very important that people vote. It's also very important that people are informed voters. Many years I've worked our polls. I've been a precinct worker and then a precinct inspector. And it's just, we want to make it as easy and welcoming as possible for every voter. But I always hope that they've taken the time to be informed before they come in and vote. And so I think both responsibilities go hand in hand. I think people have a responsibility to vote, but they have a responsibility to be an informed voter. So,
Right.
yes.
And I guess on the topic of voting rights, why is that such a critical issue? We see in states like Georgia, like Texas, passing legislation that hinders the ability of not only certain communities, but generally access to the ability to vote. Why is that such a critical issue when most of us can recognize how important voting is?
Right. Well, again, we should be making every effort to make, I think there needs to be integrity in the process. So I think that's a factor that we need to keep in mind as well. Again, working the polls and as an inspector, integrity of the process is a very important piece of it as well. But we want to make it as accessible. I mean, I think that the vote by mail has really helped make populations. It used to be that there were volunteers that would go pick people up who couldn't drive, couldn't get to the polls. And vote by mail has made that a lot easier. People are, and by far, at least around here, the majority of people vote by mail, even when there are precincts accessible and available. And in fact, the last few times I worked a precinct, very few people came and used the voter booth. Everybody walking through the door was bringing their already filled out and just dropping it in the box. So it was using that process.
Right.
So yeah, it is concerning. It is very concerning to see in other parts of our country that that we would go backwards on things like that. We've worked hard to make sure that people understand. I've certainly stood at our farmers market and encouraged people to be registered to vote and be informed voters. And so it would be awful to lose those. And it's hard to imagine, because where we're at, we don't see that. I certainly didn't. I felt that the process was very supportive when I worked the different precincts. So, yeah, it's just hard to imagine that we would go backwards.
Yeah, it's really funny. I'm actually a poll worker too. So I actually got a call this morning about the special election in California. So I'll most likely be working that election. So yeah, no, not only participating in the civic process, but getting involved beyond that is something I also argue. Go out and volunteer for a campaign, become a poll worker,
Right.
understand local policies, attend city council meetings,
Right.
county board of supervisor meetings, the power and influence of your district attorneys. I'm just
Right.
plugging my own,
But you're exceptional, Kanal, and we know that. But you know what, Kanal? I was you in high school. I was very involved before I was able to vote, before I was 18. And I'll tell you, since the day I turned 18, I've never missed an election. I voted in every election. And because of that, I always get the surveys. They always want frequent voters and they ask you how likely it is that you're going to vote in the next election. And it's like 100%. I haven't missed one yet. But I was very involved at a young age also, and frustrated that I couldn't vote. But I knew I was the exception. I knew that most of my peers were not informed and would not have taken it as seriously as I did. So you are an exception, and I'm very proud of the work that you've done.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Of course. It's only because of electeds like you, we can do our job as organizers and activists. So thank you for your role. And that leads me to my final question, which is a question I ask all interviewees, which is my generation, Gen Z. I don't know where they got Z from. I honestly.
Not either.
Yeah. The teenagers, the 16, 17 year olds that are coming up. I'm 17. I'll be voting in my next election next year for the first time in the primaries. What advice would you give to us on the issues we discussed today? Voting, elections, getting involved, whether it's housing, education, or just wanting to stay engaged, become those informed citizens. What would you say to us as the next class graduating?
Right. And it is a lot of what you said. Become engaged, but become informed. And listen. Don't, learn and listen and absorb. I know when I was younger, I was more likely to challenge, and I didn't spend enough time listening. I thought I knew what my position was, and I didn't, I wasn't as receptive to other positions. And it doesn't mean that you have to change your position, but at least know that you have made your decision based on information and hearing both sides. So that really, we have to do something to bring back the being able to work together. And it's going to be up to you guys. You guys need to really make that a priority. And You know, I do have a quote by Sandra Day O'Connor. She said, "We don't accomplish anything in this world alone, and whatever happens is the result of the whole tapestry of one's life and all the weaving of individual threads from one to another that create something." And I like that, because again, I think that the division and the unwillingness to hear opposing positions and opposing views is what will hurt us, what is hurting us. So that would be my advice, would be to be informed, be involved, listen, and be kind. So
Yeah, good advice. And just to wrap up, how can viewers stay updated on your platform, what you get up to, anything you want to link? I'll have the Facebook and websites down below, but anything you want to say?
well, you can watch the city council every first and third Tuesday of every month. And all of our website or email is available on the city website. And so we are very reachable, and we always welcome discussions with members of the community. So, and that's the most fun part of the job that I do, is getting to sit down and have conversations with people like you, Kunal, who came to me and said, "Hey, can we talk?" And what, wonderful conversations we've had since then. So absolutely, I welcome those conversations with other community members as well.
Of course. And is there anything you'd like to add before we log off?
I just not really. I feel like we've covered a lot.
Yeah,
I think that, just be kind. Everybody, we need to work together.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show. You brought a very, very, I think, much needed perspective for this episode. And I think most folks will find it interesting to find out what their legislators are actually focusing on, and open your eyes as voters. Like I said, the focus, the theme is to create the next class of voting with Gen Z, and seeing that we look to yourself as great role models. So thank you so much, Julie. You're always welcome back anytime, city council or not, just to talk about issues.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Kunal. And thank you for everything you do and your involvement.
Oh, I don't know. It's too kind.
Yeah.
Too kind.
Yeah. But remember, focus on you right now, because what you've got going in your life needs to be your priority for now.
Of course.
There are big roles for you in the future. But right now, it's what you need to focus on for your next step. So,
right. Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much, and talk to you later.
All right. Thank you.